Back in 1979, Stevie Nicks had to make the toughest choice of her whole life. She was pregnant with Don Henley's baby, but she was also right at the top of the rock and roll world. Fleetwood Mac was filling up huge stadiums with fans. The Eagles were impossible to beat, and Lindsey Buckingham was still there in the room with her every single day. What she decided to do stayed secret for 45 years. The song Sarah had some hints in it, but no one knew the whole story. Now she's 77, and she's finally talking about it. What she said about that time changes everything we thought about one of rock's biggest famous relationships. Stevie Nicks was born on May 26, 1948, inside Good Samaritan Hospital in Phoenix. Right from the minute she got here, everything around her pulled toward music and stories. Her mom and dad, Jess and Barbara, met and fell in love at Arizona State University. They got married in 1947, and they brought that same happy energy into their little girl's life. Barbara loved fairy tales a lot, so she told them to Stevie all the time until stories felt like something Stevie just knew from birth. Jess kept working his way up in big companies until he became president of Lucky Lager Brewing Company in San Francisco, then chairman and president of Armour and Company, and later executive vice president of Greyhound Corporation. His job moves made the family move to different states, but every new place gave Stevie a fresh part of America to dream about. She grew up with family roots from Germany, England, Wales, and Ireland. Her parents always told her she was the brightest star in their sky, so she grew up believing she could go after anything she wanted. Her name turned into something special way before she even understood what being famous meant. When she was really little and trying to say Stephanie, it came out sounding like TD. Barbara thought it was so cute that she started calling her TD Bird, and it slowly turned into just Stevie. The funny thing is, Jess picked Stephanie because he really liked that name. But the nickname won, and nobody called her Stephanie ever again. Years later, in a 2001 radio interview, she said she doesn't even remember saying TD. But the story stuck with her everywhere, and it became a sweet beginning for one of rock's most well-known names. When she turned 4, her grandfather A.J. Nicks came into her life like a teacher. He had tried to make it big in country and Western music when he was young, but it never happened. Still, he believed in how magic songs could be. Stevie turned into the little girl singing harmony right next to him, learning duets and taking in every note. While he worked on her singing voice, Barbara kept her home more than other kids, filling her days with stories and feeling safe, so her world felt perfect between fairy tales and music. Those two things slowly mixed together and shaped the special voice she would use on stage later. It was a voice full of mystery, but held together by beautiful harmony. She learned it all sitting beside the man who once dreamed of being famous himself. Her childhood kept moving from state to state. Every new place blended into the next one as her dad climbed higher at work. Phoenix was just the start. By the time she was 5 or 6, they lived in Los Angeles, then moved to Albuquerque for about 2 years, then to El Paso for 5 years, long enough to make real friends and keep good memories. After that, they went to Salt Lake City, where she went to Wasatch Junior High, then a strict Catholic high school downtown because her grades dropped too low. Then they moved back to the Los Angeles area and stayed in Arcadia for 10th and 11th grade. One more move happened before her senior year, this time to Atherton, near Stanford University. Here she started as the new senior at a different school. Later, she wrote about this always moving life in her 2001 song Candlebright, calling herself a nomad rolling through her whole life, and that feeling never really left her. Everything changed 1 month before she turned 16. Her parents said okay to guitar lessons even though they weren't sure she'd keep going. They rented a little guitar and got a teacher who showed her Spanish classical style twice a week for 6 weeks. When the teacher decided to go to Spain, something surprising happened. Stevie really wanted the small Goya guitar he used for lessons. Her parents bought it for her. It cost about $1,000, which was a lot of money back in the mid-1960s. On her 16th birthday, she sat down with that guitar and wrote her very first song, I've loved and I've lost and I'm sad, but not blue. She cried as she got to the last lines because the boy she liked picked her best friend instead. Her parents saw something big was starting and started guarding her time with the guitar. If she closed her door, nobody bothered her, not even for dinner. She still has that little Goya today. By 1966, she was a senior at Menlo Atherton High School when she met Lindsey Buckingham. It happened on a Wednesday night at a Young Life meeting. Lindsey was at the piano playing California Dreamin', and Stevie jumped in singing perfectly because she already knew every word from singing without music before. She later called him a darling. Even though that moment felt nice and warm, they went their separate ways after. 2 years later, things came back around and put them both in the Fritz Rabiner Memorial Band with Javier Pacheco and Bob Aguirre. Lindsey played bass, Stevie sang lead. All of a sudden, they were opening shows for Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin between 1968 and 1970, learning how powerful ambition feels when the big doors finally open. Fritz broke up in early 1972, but something new came out of it. Stevie and Lindsey moved to Los Angeles later that same year. Somewhere in that move, they turned into a couple. And she later said if they hadn't left the band, they probably never would have gotten together. People who saw them said there was a special glow around them. They called them a sexy, star-bound pair, and sometimes teased them by saying Mr. and Mrs. Intense because of how hard they worked and lived together. They made their Buckingham Nicks album and put everything they had into it. When the album came out on September 5th, 1973, it didn't do well at all. Polydor put it out even though they thought it wasn't creative enough, and the 2 singles barely got played on the radio. The album disappeared almost everywhere except in Birmingham, Alabama, where local DJs really liked it and kept playing it until a small group of fans loved it. That little bit of success was their last happy moment before Polydor dropped them. Even with all the letdown, the brave album cover showing them naked showed the fearless art side that would later make both of them special. Money got tight right away. Stevie took any job she could find. She waited tables at Clementine's. She worked at Bob's Big Boy. She cleaned Keith Olsen's house and didn't mind the joking nickname that came with it. Lindsey stuck to music and even toured with Don Everly for a little while. When Lindsey went on tour for 2 months, Stevie stayed with a friend in Aspen and stared at the mountains, wondering if this was as far as she could go. That sad moment turned into the song Landslide. She wrote in her journal that she told Lindsey they were going to make it to the top. Less than a year later, they joined Fleetwood Mac and made $800 each per week, laughing about how rich they suddenly felt. Everything flipped in late 1974. Mick Fleetwood walked into Sound City Studios looking for a spot to record the next Fleetwood Mac album. Keith Olsen played the song Frozen Love to show how good the studio sounded. Right then, Stevie and Lindsey were working in another room. Lindsey heard his own guitar through the wall, opened the door, and saw this tall guy really listening to the music. Mick didn't remember meeting him much that first time, but he never forgot the guitar part on Frozen Love. When Bob Welch left Fleetwood Mac in December 1974, that memory made Mick call Lindsey. That phone call made rock history. Lindsey said he would only join if Stevie came too. She was waiting tables at the time, barely holding on in Los Angeles. If the call had come a few weeks later, she might have already left. Mick originally just wanted a guitarist, but Lindsey saying no changed everything. Stevie joined the band not because they asked her, but because she wouldn't let them leave her behind. On December 31st, 1974, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks officially became part of Fleetwood Mac. That one night started their most famous time ever. A band that was failing suddenly got 2 new singers and a whole new sound. Just months before, Stevie had been this close to quitting. Now she was stepping into the biggest change of her life. When they started recording, Lindsey took a strong role as producer right away, making what Mick later called a Peruvian atmosphere. He meant the crazy fast pace and non-stop ideas inside the studio. The album came out on July 11th, 1995. It started slow, hitting the Billboard 200 at number 183 on August 2nd, 1975. It moved up slowly, dropped back a little, then climbed again after Rhiannon came out as a single. All of a sudden, everything changed. On September 4th, 1976, after 58 weeks on the charts, the album hit number 1. Over My Head, Rhiannon, and Say You Love Me all got into the top 20, with the last two reaching number 11. The album stayed in the top 10 for 37 weeks and in the top 40 for more than 15 months. In 2018, it got certified 7 times platinum in the United States, with over 7,000 copies sold. Stevie's magical stage look didn't come from feeling sure of herself. It came from being scared. She had really bad stage fright and begged the designer Margie Kent to make clothes she could hide in. Flowing shawls, velvet skirts, chiffon layers, platform boots, everything built a safe little world where she could step in and just breathe. She joked that she'd be super sexy under 18 pounds of fabric, and nobody would know what she really looked like. The tambourine with ribbons became part of who she was on stage and helped her move with the music. Over the years, she collected thousands of shawls. She still wears platform boots and still needs help walking in them. Her story got even deeper when the band went into the studio for Rumors. She and Lindsay had broken up in late 1975, right before recording started in early 1976. Months of big emotional fights followed. Christine McVie threw a glass of champagne at John. Stevie and Lindsay yelled into their microphones. Ken Kailat watched it all and knew this wasn't a normal album. Warner Brothers kept calling Mick to ask if the band was even still together. The recording took almost a full year and cost close to $1,000, which is about $450,000 today, after adjusting for money changes. Then came the song that hurt the most. Lindsay wrote Go Your Own Way, and the line about packing up, shacking up, and that's all you want to do cut Stevie deep like a knife. She told him it wasn't true and begged him to take it out. He said no. Every time she heard it live, she got so angry she tensed up. But she still had to sing the backup parts. She once said he knew exactly how to push her buttons, and she pushed back just as hard. The song hit number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 in December 1976, and now has more than 685,000 plays on Spotify. Stevie fought back with her own songs. She wrote Dreams, which became the band's only number, one hit on June 18, 1977. She also wrote Silver Springs with that haunting line, "You'll never get away from the sound of the woman that loves you, Kikon Kite." That song got cut from the album because Mick said it was too long. Stevie never forgot that. Standing in a parking lot while the band told her they were taking it out left a hurt that stayed. Even though the song came back to life years later, inside the studio their push and pull felt almost impossible. They argued, swore, and cried. Then the tape started rolling and they'd sing like nothing was wrong. Ken Kailat once said he'd hear them screaming at each other 1 second, then sliding into perfect harmonies the next like angels, until the tape stopped and the fighting started again. Mick later said he had no idea how they lived through that emotional crash. Stevie started using cocaine just to make it through the sessions. Mick said there were times when nobody slept for 4 or 5 weeks straight. Their dealer almost got thanked in the album credits. Stevie ended up with a hole in her nose the size of a dime and always kept a gram in her boot. A doctor warned her one more hit could kill her. That warning came right on time. Nosebleeds, blackouts, almost overdosing, everything was pushing her to the breaking point. She finally went to the Betty Ford Center in 1986 and started the long road back from something that almost took her voice away forever. It all started in the summer of 1976 when everything felt huge, loud, and impossible to get away from. Fleetwood Mac was opening for the Eagles on the big U.S. bicentennial tour, playing sold-out stadiums while America celebrated 200 years. On July 3, 1976, they played the Atlanta Omni. On July 4th, they played Tampa Stadium. Tens of thousands of people filled the places. Fireworks, loud noise, and history everywhere. That's when Stevie Nicks first really noticed Don Henley. Fleetwood Mac was still climbing fast and proving themselves while the Eagles were already on top and untouchable. Don stood out to her right a way. He stayed calm when everyone else was wild, serious in a way that felt steady. What started backstage didn't feel like nothing. It felt like the beginning of something big that wouldn't stay small. By 1977, Stevie's life was already a mess. Her long relationship with Lindsey Buckingham was over, but they still had to work together every day in Fleetwood Mac. Not long after, she had a short and painful affair with Mick Fleetwood that fell apart fast. Mick's marriage was breaking up. Drugs were all around. Feelings were raw and hurt. Then came a bigger hurt when Stevie found out her closest friend, Sarah, got involved with Mick. Right in the middle of all that mess, Don Henley came in. He got the pressure. He got the craziness. Fame was eating both of them up. Somehow they saw that same tired look in each other. Don treated Stevie in a different way. He made her feel really seen, not just used. He brought her into his world with fast cars, huge houses, and big gestures that felt crazy even for rock stars. Maseratis appeared. Mansions opened up. The Eagles lived big, and Don let her enjoy it without making her feel like just another girl. Years later, in a 2005 interview, Stevie explained why that mattered. Fleetwood Mac had just really broken through big. The Eagles had been kings for years already, but Don saw her as different from the women he usually went out with. That difference made their connection special. For a little while, getting married didn't seem impossible. It felt close enough to reach. The relationship burned bright, but didn't last long. About a year, long enough to really count. By 1979, it got to a point that changed everything. Stevie found out she was pregnant with Don's baby. For one tiny second, the future opened up. Then real life hit hard. When she told Don and said she was thinking about an abortion, his answer felt far away and not caring. In that second, she realized something sad. He wasn't planning a life together. All the quiet dreams she had broke apart. She went through with the abortion in 1979. She later explained there was no way she could have a baby while working at the crazy speed Fleetwood Mac needed. She thought it would ruin the band. If the baby had been a girl, she was going to name her Sarah. At the same time, both of them were at the very top of their game. Fleetwood Mac was touring Rumors, an album that would sell over 40,000 copies around the world. The Eagles were setting the rules with Hotel California. Stadiums sold out every night. Cameras and reporters never stopped. Money and drugs came without any stop. Stevie was writing some of her strongest songs ever while fighting a cocaine problem that would later cost her more than $1,000. The hurt from Don showed up in her songs. Sarah came out in 1979 and carried the heavy feelings of the baby she didn't have, plus the messy love triangle that broke her world. Even after all of it, she and Don stayed in touch. In 1981, they came back together for music on Leather and Lace, which hit number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. It showed that some connections don't go away even when they break. But Don wasn't the only storm in her life. In November 1977, during the Rumors tour in New Zealand, Stevie and Mick Fleetwood crossed a line they shouldn't have. Their affair started quietly and went on for almost a year. Mick was still married to Jenny Boyd. Stevie was still tied emotionally to Don. Drugs and long nights in the studio made everything blurry. The idea started earlier during a famous 1976 Rolling Stone photo shoot by Annie Leibovitz when the band posed in bed together. Stevie later admitted she spent hours curled up next to a shirtless Mick, and that moment planted a seed she couldn't ignore. The connection felt real to her. She lisped. Otter called Mick one of her greatest loves. She said he was regal like an English king, and she was struck from the very start. Recording sessions for Tusk made them even closer. Cocaine turned normal. So did alcohol, marijuana, honey, hot tea, and nights that never ended and wiped away all rules. What really broke her wasn't just the affair ending, but the way it ended. By Halloween 1978, Mick showed up at a party with her best friend Sarah on his arm. The message was out there for everyone, and it hurt bad. Still, Stevie said the love was real. After Lindsay, Mick had been a safe place for her feelings, even if it was never going to last. The hurt spread bigger. Mick was married and had 2 daughters. He and Jenny Boyd first married on June 12th, 70. They divorced, then got married again in 1977, right before the affair started. Their daughters, Amy Rose, born January 17th, 1971, and Lucy, born in 1973, were part of a family Stevie really cared about. That made it all so much worse. Jenny had just promised to try again in the marriage when everything fell apart. The stress from rumors plus heavy drugs broke the marriage. They divorced for good in 1978, only 6 months after Jenny got sober. She moved back to England with the kids, ending a chapter full of hurt nobody could fix. Stevie later put it in her own words. "Never in a million years," she said, "could she have pictured it happening." She loved his family. She knew it could never work, and it didn't. She admitted drugs messed up her thinking. A sober woman, she said, might have run away. Instead, she stayed, pulled in by kindness and craziness at the same time. The cocaine made it all worse. Stevie later guessed she spent over 1,000 and thousands on the drug, then said no, probably millions. At $100 a gram, she was buying it for everyone around her. She wore a gold and turquoise vial with diamonds around her neck, so it was always close. The damage was scary and real. A hole burned through her nose. Nosebleeds happened all the time. She fell down on stage. She blacked out. Doctors said she risked a brain bleed or dying young. She knew it was killing her but couldn't quit. The affair and the drugs kept feeding each other until it all spun out of control. Then 1979 came and the pregnancy that wasn't supposed to happen. Stevie was 31 and shocked. She had an IUD. She trusted her doctor. She thought she was safe. When it happened anyway, panic hit hard. Fleetwood Mac was unstoppable right then. The band had its famous lineup since 1975. By 1979, they were getting ready to put out Tusk, a double album that cost over $1,000 to make. On October 10, 1979, they got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. 2 days later, on October 12th, Tusk came out. A huge 9-month tour was already set, 20 songs, more than 73 minutes of music. There was no room for a baby in that world. What made it even harder was Lindsey Buckingham. He was still there every day, writing songs, recording, living in the same old hurts. Stevie knew having a baby with Don Henley while working side by side with Lindsey would be too much to handle. She called it a nightmare. She believed it would completely destroy Fleetwood Mac. So she made the hardest choice of her life. The abortion happened in 1979, just months before Tusk came out. She later said if she had kept the baby, she wouldn't have taken just a short break. She would have left for years, and Fleetwood Mac wouldn't have made it. The choice followed her, but she thought it saved the monde. Years later, the story came up again when Don Henley talked about it in public in a 1991 GQ interview. He said Sarah was about their unborn child. The song used to be 16 minutes long before they cut it down during the Tusk sessions. It came out as a single in December 1979 and got to number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. Stevie later said his claim was mostly right. The song had more than one meaning. It was about the child she never had, and about her friend Sarah, who married Mick. All those feelings folded into one sad, beautiful song. In 1980, Stevie Nicks did something almost nobody thought she would. While still right in the middle of Fleetwood Mac, she quietly got into the business side of music and helped start Modern Records with Danny Goldberg and Paul Fishkin. Back then, going solo while staying in a big band looked like it would kill your career. People in the music world called it the kiss of death. But Stevie went ahead anyway. Even before she finished all her work with Fleetwood Mac, the three of them got a deal with Atlantic Records in June 1979. They were super careful with details, even putting 1980 on the Modern Records logo so nobody mixed it up with an old label that had the same name. That deal with Atlantic changed everything. Paul Fishkin later said that except for the Rolling Stones, Stevie was the top-selling artist in the whole Atlantic group. And he didn't say that lightly. The risk paid off fast. On Monday, July 27th, 1981, Belladonna came out, and in just weeks it was clear this wasn't just a little side thing. By September 5th, 1981, the album hit #1 on the Billboard 200 only 5 weeks after it came out. Even crazier, it went platinum on October 7th, 1981, just 72 days in. The album kept going strong, staying on the Billboard 200 from July 1981 all the way to June 1984. By January 1990, it hit 4 times platinum for 4,000 copies shipped. In 2004, it got certified 5 times platinum, meaning more than 5,000 copies sold in the United States. Around the world, it sold about 5,000 copies, with Canada adding 200,000. Belladonna ended 1981 as the 5th biggest-selling album of the year. Inside that big success were songs full of her real life. Leather and Lace started as a song Stevie wrote for Waylon Jennings, G.S. and Jesse Coulter, but it never made their album. Years before, Stevie dated Don Henley from 1977 to 1978. The relationship ended in pain when she got pregnant and decided to end it, an experience that later went into the song Sarah. Even after all that, they stayed connected. During Belladonna, Stevie was really close with the producer Jimmy Iovine, but she ended up singing close, personal words with her old boyfriend. That emotional pull stayed in the recording. Released as the second single, Leather and Lace got to #6 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1982 and stayed there for 3 weeks. Belladonna did something nobody expected from a first solo album. It gave 4 top 40 hits. Stop Draggin' My Heart Around hit #3. Edge of 17 reached #11, inspired by a mix-up with words and the sound of a white-winged dove. After that, The Glitter Fades climbed to #32. With those hits, Stevie showed she could stand strong all by herself without Fleetwood Mac. By 1986, though, the price of all that success got really scary. Years of using cocaine burned a hole right through the wall in her nose. When she saw a plastic surgeon, he told her straight, if she didn't quit, her nose could fall in or she could die. Around the same time before a tour, she partied so hard for 48 hours straight that she forgot to take out her contact lenses and almost went blind. Those scary moments pushed her into the Betty Ford Clinic in 1986. Looking back, Stevie said she was the worst addict in the band. She said everybody used drugs, but she went way deeper. Even Tom Petty was afraid one day he'd get a call saying she was gone. She couldn't even look at pictures from those years. Friends stepping in and pure fear finally made her get help. After rehab, another problem grabbed her. From 1987 to 1994, a doctor kept giving her Klonopin and raising the amount. Stevie later said Klonopin was worse than cocaine. She low hell. Spent 8 years of her life, she stopped writing songs, gained weight, and barely remembered going on tour. By the end, she was mixing it with regular store drugs and risking an accidental overdose. The final breaking point came in late 1993 after she fell at home and cut her forehead open. Later, when she looked at a Polaroid picture of herself, she realized she would die from something stupid if she didn't stop. She picked to live and went through a tough 47-day hospital detox to take her life back. Her health fights kept coming. Broken silicone implants needed fixing in 1994. Epstein-Barr virus gave her long-lasting tiredness. Nose surgery fixed the cocaine damage. She was battling addiction, surgeries, and being worn out all at once, and somehow she made it through. In October 2024, Stevie talked openly again. In a CBS Sunday Morning interview on October 27th, she shared details about her 1979 pregnancy with Don Henley. She said the choice was hers, and she has no regrets. She said having a child would have completely messed up Fleetwood Mac. At 76, she stood strong on that. That clear thinking carried into her later big moments. On March 29, 2019, she became the first woman ever inducted twice into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She opened the show herself, got back together with Don Henley on stage, and ended with Edge of 17. The moment felt like everything came full circle. Then, on September 27th, 2024, she put out The Lighthouse, her first new song since 2011. She wrote it because of the 2022 Supreme Court decision, and it became a strong message of power and a warning. She sang it live on October 12th, 2024. Even though she's scared to do some things now, her connection with Don Henley stays warm and full of respect. What started with love and heartbreak turned into something bigger and deeper. At 77, Stevie is living proof that big dreams, real pain, and deep concern, deep connections that last forever, can all live together. Not as things to regret, but as parts of her story that still talk to each other.